Fantastic. Okay, welcome to our first live panel discussion at Foiling Week 2020. We have people coming from all over the world. We have Bruno Gentoli, and I am Chris Museler, one of the hosts of the Gurrit Forum that we're working on this week. And so we have Bruno Gentoli on your screen from Lago di Garda. We have Andrew Pindar, my co-host, and our guests today are talking about one of the three pillars of Foiling Week. The three pillars of Foiling Week are accessibility, safety, and sustainability. And today we're going to be talking about mainly the sustainability angle of Foiling Week. Why is sustainability and Foiling Week tied together? There are a couple reasons, but the big one is that hydrofoiling has attracted a lot of attention to our water sports and wind sports space, and it goes beyond those sports. And so we have a really big platform, and we feel like we have a responsibility to use that platform and talk about issues like sustainability. Our guests today are Blair Tuke from Team New Zealand, and with his new charitable trust that he's working on with Peter Burling called Live Ocean. And then we have Anne-Cecile Turner, who's a sustainability expert, but she's in our sphere, she's largely known for creating a really model of sustainability excellence in terms of running events and messaging for the Volvo Ocean Race, which is now the Ocean Race. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Morning, Chris.
Andrew, I just want to bring you into the fold because you'll be sharing and asking some questions. You are well known to all of us for your large sporting team sponsorships, but you know Blair and Anne-Cecile pretty well over the course of your projects?
Well, I've sort of followed Blair as many people around the world have done, and it's going to be one of the interesting points is when you see people who are at the pinnacle of the sport. And I think in Blair's case, when he's looking at all the foretop parts of sailing, then I'm a fan. So I think that's when we probably get into the point of when the sponsors look for people who can represent beliefs, and I think we'll probably get into that. And I've had the privilege of knowing Anne-Cecile for more years than probably both of us would like to care to remember. And I think that's what's really interesting is looking at somebody like Anne-Cecile, who she isn't just jumping on a bandwagon or jumping onto the wave. She's been involved in ocean sustainability and looking at sustainability of society for as many years as I've known her, and I'd say that's a long time. So I think it's interesting to look at the juxtapositions of people who can represent a cause and a brand and have a voice, but also people who are really doing the spade work and digging into the subject matter, people like Anne-Cecile.
Awesome. Well, speaking of digging in, let's get into it. Blair, when you and I talked to each other in Melbourne, seems like ages ago, when you won your 7th World Championship in the 49er, I learned more about your background, and I realized I added it all up. I don't know anyone who's been on the water or under the water more days in a year than you. So it doesn't seem like too much of a surprise to me that you've picked up the charitable trust Live Ocean. But tell me how that came about between you and Peter Burling, and then why you're passionate about it right now.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It certainly does seem like quite a long time ago that we were racing the 49er Worlds back in February. This year's certainly been flipped on its head. But yeah, I think for myself, the ocean's always been a massive part of my life. I was lucky that I grew up really close to the ocean in the far north of New Zealand. And the whole way through my childhood, I was on the water with my brothers, mucking around, fishing, diving, kayaking, water skiing, and then got into sailing at about 12 years old, I guess. And then as I sort of progressed and went through it, it was still a big part of my life. But I guess the turning point probably for me was after doing the ocean race, and both Pete and I sort of came back from that. And, it really occurred to us just how bad the ocean was, the direction it was heading. And we sort of, said to each other, we wanted to do more really. And, that's where we started to come up with the idea of, what that could be. And it was a year of us, so sort of 2018, 2019 was a year of learning, talking to a lot of people within the ocean sector, to scientists, to other NGOs, and just sort of sussing out the space. And then, we knew we needed to act fast. And then that's when sort of Live Ocean was born at the end of last year was when we founded that. So Live Ocean's mission is to amplify and accelerate positive ocean change. There's a lot of issues that the ocean faces, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today, but it really stuck out to us at that point that it was heading in a bad direction and things needed to change. And, it was really, the ocean's at a tipping point. So that's sort of where we are. It's been, a busy year since we launched, or coming up a year. We've got behind a couple of good projects. The first project was one that's very close to our hearts, the Antipodes and Albatross. So the Antipodes Islands are to the southeast of New Zealand. And I guess from doing the ocean race, we'd spent a lot of time with the Albatross, and that they were during some of the toughest times of the race. They were right there. But once this project got put in front of us, it was pretty scary to us, or alarming, the rate that the birds were going missing. For those that don't know, but the albatross, or a lot of seabirds for that matter, are a product for bycatch for offshore fishing fleets, surface longline fleets. So these albatross basically getting hooked in the set, and then and unfortunately drowning. So the numbers of Antipodes and albatross have plummeted from like 18,000 to 6,000 breeding birds within like 10 years. So for us, it was a really good project to get behind. We'd put trackers on these birds, and we can see where they go around the world, overlay that with global fishing watch data, and then sort of see where they're coming into trouble. So that was the first project for us. The second project's also within New Zealand, down in the sub-Antarctic islands again, the Auckland Islands, mapping the southern right whales. So that's really a good project to get behind, to understand where they're going, with climate change, how that's changing over the years, and also just understanding what the population is. They are recovering after years of whaling, but just how much they are. So yeah, we're in the thick of it. There's lots more to be done, but it's been a good year for us since launch. So yeah, that's a little bit of background, but looking forward to getting stuck into talking more about it.
That's fantastic, and it's amazing that you have so many other campaigns going on in your life, and you're putting so much energy into Live Ocean. And Anne-Cecile, I'll give you a chance to talk about what you're up to, but you brought it to my attention. What's unique about Live Ocean is that instead of focusing on the broader issue of ocean health or conservancy, they're really spending their time focusing on local issues first, where they can make a difference on the shores of New Zealand, on the islands around New Zealand. And I think that's kind of unique. It seems like sailors are usually a bunch of doers. And speaking of doers, Andrew pointed out that you really want to make stuff happen instead of just spreading messages. So maybe share with me, you have a company called Blue Shift, your consultancy company, and you just had an ocean summit yesterday, which was based out of Newport, Rhode Island, probably in partnership with the 11th Hour, and with 52 countries involved. So let's make that transition from someone like Blair, who's actually doing stuff that really affects change in their area, which is an effective strategy, to the projects that you've been working on.
Well, that's very interesting to say that, because we effectively had the Ocean Race Summit yesterday, gathering more than 700 attendees. So it was a real success, and it's a sign that this subject is of interest for the world leaders, I would say. We had the ex-president of Costa Rica speaking, and senators, and private sector, civil society, all sorts of stakeholders, NGOs. And I was also animating an action lab on ocean restoration, how to fund it. Is it an impossible challenge? And, the restoration projects were highlighted. Someone did a pitch to the panel, who are a mix of funders, philanthropists, banks, and initiatives. And the idea is really to push restoration projects, help them to identify solutions that are scalable. So this work is crucial, because and it's facing a lot of issues, in terms of governmental regulations, support on the local space, scalability, measurement. So we were really highlighting what are the issues and how can restoration projects like those, be improving their files when they are going for funding. So that's really interesting. So I encourage you to carry on this really good work.
Cool. Now let's look at the ocean race as kind of something that we know a little bit more about as a model. And what I'd like to do is kind of have, so Blair, you were involved in the last Volvo Ocean Race, which is now the Ocean Race, and it's pretty cool that you're carrying on actually in some ways some of the projects that and initiatives that they started. Anne-Cecile, can you explain to us why, first of all, the sustainability model of an event like the Volvo Ocean Race was successful, and then let's move into that topic of behavior change to see how you get people to act. So Blair is really familiar with your efforts, but explain to us all, in a nutshell, how things went in the last Volvo Ocean Race as far as sustainability messaging and efforts.
Well, I think, yeah, to answer your questions about why it's successful, and I think we changed the way we approached sustainability. And I think usually, traditionally, the sustainability specialists, and I'm totally included in that group, failed in getting the attention from leadership, because we took sustainability by the angle of measuring your impact, gathering invoices, needing for resources, and it was a long and boring process that failed to engage. And the reason why, and I've been knowing that for a long time, and that's why I was so motivated to join the Ocean Race, is it's a platform. It's a platform for engagement. It's a voice, and any kind of organization can say so. So we are not only putting the house in order, obviously, pushing sustainable excellence in every corner of the organization, but we are also talking about that, sharing our journey. We're creating programs for schools, for kids, for the scientists, for the sailors, for the private sector, that they can engage with in a very, very pragmatic way. And I like to give the example of Volvo Cars, for example. They understood the scale of the issue at the first Ocean Summit in Alicante when we started. 6 months later, they announced the banning of single-use plastic across all their operations, canteens, including factories. And 9 months later, at the end of the race, they used the race as a platform to announce that they would produce the cars with 25% of recycled plastic by 2025. So it's like from awareness to internal action to industrial commitment. That's real change. That's real impact and legacy. And that's the reason why I'm not showing off here, but we won 6 awards as a recognition of the program first edition.
Now, a question I want to shift to Andrew really quick, and then I have a question for Blair. So Andrew, you had mentioned before we began that what was interesting about an athlete like Blair is that he's been involved in basically all the marquee events of our sport, the Volvo Ocean Race, the Olympics. Blair, you're in Sail GP now, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, with the New Zealand team.
Awesome, with the Professional Sports League and the America's Cup. So let's talk a little bit about that. I don't know if you want to call it a trend, but it definitely seems very obvious that corporations, sports teams, events are more and more tying themselves to social and environmental causes. I mean, it makes sense to us because we're really close to a lot of those things. But why is that happening?
In my opinion, the lockdown for so many of us, and it's happened clearly across the whole world, I don't think anybody has been inured from the impact of coronavirus. I think it's caused a lot of time for people, individuals and corporations to reflect on what they've been doing. And I think that of the creation of value for companies, and in fact, I've had a conversation, a discussion with Anne-Cecile about this, as to when on the profit and loss account and when on the balance sheet of a company, what is really within the DNA of that organization? And is it purely dollars? Is it purely euros? Is it purely pounds? And I think that companies realizing that they have a role within society. And it's sort of a bit counterintuitive with some of the other pressures in the world at the minute, when people are just chasing the greenback, chasing the dollar, that people are realizing that we have a role to play. And I think also there's a link here between both Blair, that he won't realize it, and Anne-Cecile, of Ellen MacArthur. So Anne-Cecile's husband, Mark, used to be in business. He helped put Ellen MacArthur around the world, and it was Ellen MacArthur who saw the albatross, Blair, and I think she did a documentary on the BBC in about 2007 about the plight of the albatross, because when she was racing around the world, mainly by herself, she was seeing what was happening to the loss of the albatross. And that was the sort of trigger that caused her a long time ago to create the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is very much looking at the way that business and society needs to readdress how it interacts with itself in order to create a sustainable economic future that allows society to work. And I think we're at that cusp now where the conversation is very much is taking place. And that's why when you've got the likes of Blair Tuke, who to many of us, we're sort of in awe, Blair, his sporting prowess, but you have a voice. You know, people like you, it's like looking at the top sportsmen in other sports. People will listen to you, and when you have that voice, you've got a position of influence over society, which I think make a big difference. Because without that voice, we're going to find ourselves struggling to make a change in organizations. And do you know what? The CEOs and the marketing VPs of companies, they are human beings as well, and they will listen to the voice of a Blair Tuke.
Awesome. And so here's the thing that Anne-Cecile and I dug into the other day. We talked about the Volvo Ocean Race. I'm just going to look down at my notes for a sec. Apologies. That you know, there were a couple different parts to the success of the sustainability efforts in the Volvo Ocean Race, and that was they wanted to lead the way in sustainability excellence, which they did. They wanted to recognize their own voice, and they wanted to amplify that platform. You know, that platform that you have from being, you know, this large event in the world, or a large, in Blair, in your case, a large individual in the world. And then they want to spread the message in a programmatic way. Now, the third aspect, or the fourth part of this led me, you know, when I asked Anne-Cecile what she was most passionate about right now, was how do you take all that and then someone sees the message, and how do they actually act on that? What are the pathways to either support something to help people move in the right direction, or to physically go and do something, if it's a beach cleanup or something way beyond that? So the question I have, and we'll talk about the science of behavior change, because I think that's really important right now. Blair, when you look at some of the initiatives and efforts and causes that you're trying to bring attention to, like the, what's the type of albatross it is?
Antipodean albatross.
Antipodean albatross, and then this southern right whale. We have the North Atlantic right whale.
Yes.
Very similar issues, very slow moving animals, you know, they can get hit easily, and they're rare now.
Do you know why they're called the right whale?
No.
Because whalers used to call it because they were so slow and they were so inquisitive, they'd come into the harbors, and the whalers called it the right whale to hunt, because they were. And then also because they'd go for the calf first, and then the mother would hang around, and then they'd get the mother as well.
Oh,
so not very nice why it's called that. But
not a nice way, but true. We should change the name. The cute whale. So what I wanted to ask you was, so far it's early in the organization, but have you run into any personal frustrations with moving forward with not just identifying some issues, but making some positive changes, like the longliners, you know, net use, all those things? Have you run into any frustration with making behavior change?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, and it's been something we've been really aware of since the start. I think to make people, or to make change, first you have to get people to care, and to do that, you have to try and tell stories and engage them in a positive way. There it's pretty scary, right? If you look at the issues that the ocean faces and some of the other environmental issues, and if there's too many negative stories out there, or you see things in a negative light, it's quite easy. I think it's in the human nature to sort of turn away from those things. So for us at Live Ocean, it's all been about, yes, these are very scary and serious issues, and we need to change them. But how do you engage people? How do you get them to really care about that? Because if you can get people to flick that switch like you talk about and care about it and be engaged, then that's when you get change. So for us, that's been important right since the start, and I think we've got some traction through that. But sure, you run into hurdles, because it is, it's the big issues you're talking about, but you need to approach them in positive ways and get people behind them.
Awesome. So there's a lot there, what you just said. Anne-Cecile, when I asked you what you're most excited about right now, you said the science of behavior change. That seems like that's the holy grail of causes of everything that Blair's working on and what you're working on, and what the corporations, like what Andrew was saying, what they want to try to achieve if they really want to do a good job. Maybe give me some more practical thoughts on that when we talk about the issues that Blair's focusing on and that you're focusing on in terms of the science of behavior change.
Yeah, I think the reason why I'm interested in that is because there's not a lot of initiatives done in that space that are working, linking causes and people's engagement. Otherwise we wouldn't be in that situation. And during the Ocean Race Summit in The Hague, we had some specialists of behavior change, and now we're working with them as well. We're working as well with the MIT on a project for our race village to improve the race village experience for the visitors. And the whole thinking is, how do people change? What's in it for them? What's the mechanism in the brain that will make them tick? It's different. It's a complex issue. I think we all have had a moment where you suddenly realized. I remember mine very vividly at a conference in La Sorbonne in Paris, and I was thinking, well, that's my light bulb moment where I understood that we couldn't live the same way as before. It's like 20 years ago, but it took me a while. But then you're on a journey, and the science of behavior change is like, how are we going to address world leaders? How are we going to address scientists, media, schools, in the way that they will be interested, understand, and motivated to actually act themselves. And of course, as you say, we can't be doom and gloom. We already understood that, and that was a bit of a learning curve. We've pictured the world, these disasters, and it's creating fear. And fear is the opposite of engaging. So when you're in fear, you can't really commit. Another example could be the main reason why people equip their houses with solar panels is, first they want to do good, but also because their neighbors doing it. So the peer pressure is a huge element. So that's another example, and we could go on like that. But using all that and implementing these skills and knowledge in our program, that's a challenge. I'm not saying we're doing it successfully yet, but that we will try for sure.
Right. And when we spoke, you said none of us are perfect at this right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't give you an example of one, I would say, sustainable in brackets organization, because the system that gives us that organization is wrong. So it's a big systemic shift that we need to implement.
And Blair, since you've started Live Ocean, do you notice that there's a demographic of the population that you're reaching so far that is more engaged than another in terms of the Live Ocean and the initiatives that you're working on?
Oh, I think we've purposely sort of tried to keep that demographic quite spread. We've tried to engage any sort of ocean people, whether it's sailors, swimmers, whatever it is. I think a key point for those listening there is that, and Andrew talked about it before in regards to myself having a voice, but I think sailors in general have a very important part to play when you talk about the ocean. We have, I guess, as human beings, we've got a pretty good understanding and probably a bias towards land conservation because we live on it, but the ocean actually gets left behind quite a lot in that a lot of the time. But as sailors, where it's, you know, it's our playgrounds where we spend a lot of time. We have a very special role to play. So I think that's, you know, something I want to try and get across. But yeah, the demographic, I think, you know, you're trying to get everyone. I think that's the thing about the ocean, is that a lot of the issues that it has is not just, you know, from people that are on the ocean. You know, a lot of it's from, you know, land usage. So, you know, in New Zealand, I know that sedimentation, runoff is such a big problem, and that's all land. That when you talk about plastic, that's people's behavior and how they act in their day-to-day lives. So the land and the ocean are so intertwined. But, you know, for a healthy world, we need a healthy ocean. So, you know, we need to keep striving towards that 70% of this planet, and we got to, you know, look after it.
Well, it's interesting that I'm just drawing a connection here when I hear you say that. This is, now bear with me here, might be a leap. You know, like you said, we're land-based people, and we're maybe sometimes more focused on those issues. Hydrofoiling is attracting more people with the newer water sports, and we'll be talking about this on Saturday with kind of our recreational foiling and beach water sports forum. And so it is getting more people in the water, whether it be in sup foiling or winging or more kite foiling or UFO and wasps, those kind of things. And so I think that that if people look around and see top athletes in these water sports tied to these causes that they're passionate about, I think that'll affect the culture of the people who do those sports, right? Sailing is a much bigger sport than, in this case that I was referring to as wing foiling. But right now, we're going to have two of the most visible YouTubers in the world right now on wing foiling, and two of them are female. And their messaging, you know, interspersed throughout their videos, has some little environmental things, like little Kainani Drexler from Maui. If she finds a piece of trash in the water, she puts that in her video and says, what do we do about this? And she has some ideas. So I think culturally, with more and more people being attracted to water sports, in our case, we're talking about hydrofoil water sports, it almost, like you said, with sailors, it's almost more important than ever for us to just keep that as a steady drumbeat in terms of the things that we're passionate about and sharing those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't just go sailing anymore and try and win races. You know, you need to have a bigger, and that's for everyone. That's not just us. I think, you know, everyone, every time you're on the water, you need to understand it's a privilege to be on the water, and you got to think about how you're using it, what you're taking from it, and then, you know, really try and step up and have a voice for it, and lead by example, I think.
Bruno and Andrew. Bruno, if you have any social media questions, lob them our way that are appropriate.
Yeah, we don't have a social media question, but I have one, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
So actually, it's for both, for Anne-Cecile and for Blair. What, like, short-term sustainability actions do you see in for the near future? Like Anne-Cecile was telling us about the Volvo cars, that in 9 months they turned some behaviors that they were having in the factories. Are there any other industries that can change their behaviors fast enough to because what I see is that most of the things that go really forward, like we talk about 2025 or 2030, and it seems really far away.
Well, in terms of industries, and it's interesting you say that, because when you look at a sports event like the Ocean Race, it's like a mini example of the society. Like, it's a mini village. So our race village, you know, we have to face in a very concentrated manner all the challenges that a city faces, in terms of energy, in terms of water and waste, in terms of you know, social aspect as well, inclusion and diversity. So the approach we're having is an industry-led approach to actually engage our partners in that journey. And we're regrouping them around the idea of sustainable mobility. And Andrew knows about that a lot. And in that area of sustainable mobility, we are including, obviously, logistics companies that are, you know, have such a role to play in that space. car makers, bike makers, the whole shipping companies, obviously, the whole maritime transport. Sailing is the best symbol of sustainable mobility. So that's very much linked. Renewable energy is another one. How a race village like ours could be powered without fossil fuel. That's a big challenge. We're not there yet, but that's another idea. Sustainable finance, impact investing, huge, massive potential role to play in helping drive the funding and the investments towards the ocean. The ocean is really under-studied, under-recognized. It's covering 70% of the planet and drives, such a low level of investments. That is, we have a role to play to actually raise our voice there. So industry per industry, I can give you lots of examples of ready-made solutions that we can implement and showcase on the Race Village as sustainable innovation platform.
Cool. We're not, obviously this discussion is not over. We're nearing the end of our discussion. I know we're talking about some things that we're really passionate about and kind of the hard work, that the efforts that, our panelists are working on right now. I do want to always ask, Anne, did you have something to say?
Yeah,
always.
I just be careful.
Well, I was just thinking, perhaps you're going to talk about some of the practical steps, and if not, perhaps I can just chip in before we get to close. But I was just reflecting on some of this, and certainly in reference to one or two things that Anne-Cecile said there, then organizations, companies, projects, events need to have tools. And I saw that was it this morning or last night, that Joe Royle at Common Seas launched a tool for the hospitality industry because there's been this horrible move to single-use plastics again through lockdown. People have been feeling as though they're protecting things they're touching. So there are other people out there in the space that are collaborative to this. So Joe Royle at Common Seas, if you wanted to look that up, they've launched a great tool on that. But I think it's really great thinking of tools that certainly within our business of logistics, we're very keen to work with the shipping companies. And I know that that's a conversation that's being had within the Ocean Race, within SailGP, thinking of how we can do this, how we can collaborate to reduce impact. And the tool that we use within our business at Marine Shift 360, and I think you might have some reference to that elsewhere within presentations, but certainly we've found that tools like Marine Shift 360 can really provide a guidebook for organizations and companies as to how they can address some of their worst behaviors, at least.
And Andrew, really quick on the Marine Shift 360, that's where, and Anne-Cecile and I talked about this, Blair, you may know about this, with the life cycle assessments of what they're producing, right?
Yes, yeah. Okay. It's looking at the circular side of that, and of course that's talking about the circular side of it. That's something again that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation really pushes hard at, reviewing what we can do to actually address the fundamental, instead of just reducing, how we can make better use of one-time use becomes multi-time use. We're not just trashing things and going to landfill or chucking things into the sea. So I think this addressing, there is this great debate, and hopefully the platforms that Blair is taking forward with his projects and that Anne-Cecile with hers, that we can keep on sharing these platforms. I know that a great behaviour of the Ocean Race is that it shared lots of its tools with World Sailing, for instance, which are then being able to be made use of. So if we believe in this because of the societal benefits, the importance to save the planet, then we've got to work together. It has to be about collaborative endeavour. It can't be about people thinking they're going to get an advantage over the other one because they're somehow better. We've got to behave within society as a society.
So to give an example of collaboration, Blair, I would like to introduce you to a person who's called Andrea Bogomolny. She's a project officer at the Island Foundation, and yesterday she pitched an innovation that is fighting entanglement for the right whale, North Atlantic right whale. So that could be something interesting for you. I don't know, maybe you know that already, but she's really identified, she's created a fund with the Island Foundation called the GEAR Fund, And maybe you know already about that project. But I was thinking it's a very interesting project to support.
No, I hadn't heard of it. So yeah, I'd love to. If you could connect us, that'd be great. Thanks. And I think that's something that we've really enjoyed coming into the non-for-profit, into the charities. It's just, everyone is in. We come from a competitive background, but the competition and the challenge here is for a healthy ocean, right? And that actually means that everyone's in it together. So I think that's been pretty cool for us to, be able to support scientists and people that have been, slaving away for years on not much funding, to back them to support other organizations too. So I'd love to connect. Thanks.
Perfect. That's legacy for this event.
Nice.
Perfect. Well, I can't say that any better. And the one thing I want to end with is Blair and Anne-Cecile. We'll start with Blair. You're really busy, and we're talking about something that's not even a side job, just a passion that's taking up a lot of your time too. But what are you doing for fun these days? You getting out or under the water?
Yeah, both of those things. No, so I think this for both Pete and I can speak for Pete. There is something we're incredibly passionate about. We've seen the urgency, like I talked about. We're very, very close to a tipping point. So we're basically pouring any spare time we have into this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when we're not doing this or our sailing jobs, then we're back out in the water. Or for me, it's surfing, it's free diving still, spear fishing. It's one of my favorite hobbies. Been getting into some more foiling, actually, some winging and some just toe and sort of foiling. So that's been good fun. But anytime we get any free time, it's always back on the ocean. So really appreciate having me on tonight or this morning for you guys. It's always good to connect with people around the world about these very important issues and challenges ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Blair. And Anne-Cecile, how about you? Are you just working all the time? That's what Andrew makes it sound like.
Well, unfortunately, these days I don't have much time during the day, but I'm lucky enough to live in Switzerland, in Lausanne, near the lake. So I make the most of the mountains, walking in the mountains, cycling, swimming in the lake. And when the world of sport will come back on track, enter a few triathlons around, that's a little bit the idea we have. Unfortunately, not enough sailing because near the lake there's not enough good wind, but I'll get back to it soon.
Yeah. Well, you might want to take a tip from Blair and do wing foiling. I think you don't need a ton to get up on those.
Oh, I'd love to. And I love New Zealand as well.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, everyone. This is our first live forum for the GURT Forum for the Foiling Week 2020. And we have interviews and a couple other, we have maybe 5 other panel discussions, another 10 interviews over the course of this week, really starting tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a full day of live reporting from Lake Garda, and then these live forums and interviews. So thank you all for joining, Blair and Cecile, Bruno and Andrew from Lake Garda, from all over the world. Actually, this is kind of cool. Thank you everyone so much. And I'll leave it to Bruno to do the outro, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
So, thanks for joining.